Welcome to the Making Nice with Naughty podcast, where we delve into the art of intimacy for the rule-following, organized, perfectionist, practical, and color within the line types. I'm your co-host, Dr. Tom Murray, a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified sex therapist, and the author of the book that started it all.
Hi, I'm Dr. Frances Robbins, a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. My background includes a master's degrees in nursing and international health, along with a doctorate in business administration. We're here to explore the world of intimacy in a way that resonates with even the most structured and detail-oriented individuals.
In Making Nice with Naughty, we uncover the secrets to navigating intimacy for those who thrive on rules, order, and perfectionism.
Join us as we discuss practical insights, expert advice, and personal stories that will guide you through the journey of connecting intimately while staying true to your organized and rule-following nature.
Whether you color within the lines or prefer a perfectly outlined plan for everything, we've got you covered.
So buckle up and get ready to explore the fascinating world of intimacy. With us, Making Nice with Naughty is not just a podcast. It's your guide to a fulfilling and organized love life.
This is Making Nice with Naughty. Let's dive in.
All right. Well, Tom. It is so good to see you this week. And now we are going through our journey of Making Nice with Naughty. Last time we met, we went through chapter 6, I believe. Was it chapter 6? And it was all about values. Remember? And how values define us, what values are. You went and you talked about the North Star. You talked about that it's a journey, not necessarily a destination. And you had encouraged me, along with our listeners, you encouraged me to spend some time in that exercise called Value Sort. And it's like online, Value Sort online. And so I did that, and I wanted to take a few moments and just kind of go over my experience with that, especially if there's others out there as they're listening to us today that will take a plunge. So first of all, it wasn't quick. It is not, I mean, we're so programmed, right? Which animal are you? You know, what kind of color are you? Like all these little quizzes that you see on the different social media platforms. So I really thought that it was going to be something quick. It is not quick. And just
well, it sounds like you took some time to
I did.
You took it seriously.
I took it really seriously because I went into it with really a spirit of discovery.
Yeah.
You know, what are my values? And how do you even identify what is important to you? So basically, for those who haven't done it, it's literally what is it, 50 words? There's like 50, I think, words, or maybe 100. Anyway, there's all these different words that pop up on the screen, and you determine when you read the word and you read the definition, you determine if this is important to you, not important to you, or very important to you, right? So there's these categories. Tom, shit. I identified 20 things that were very important to me.
Right.
So, you know, you go through this and you're reading it and you're like, oh yeah, that's important to me. It goes over to very important. And it was few that were not at all important to me. And then it gets harder, right? Because you identify all all these words that are important to you. And then it has us go over it has me continually shrinking my list.
Yes.
Well, out of these 20, which 15 are important, which 10 are important. And anyway, it eventually gets you down to 5. And it was hard, really hard.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I ended up spending probably half a day on this exercise because I really went into it with the spirit of discovery. Yeah. And I didn't.
Which sounds like that might be a value right there, is discovery. It can be an important value too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, interestingly enough, where I wrote down the 5.
Uh-huh.
So, um, curiosity was high, but it didn't make the top 5. But
Ah,
it
okay.
made it like to the top 10.
Okay.
So, family made the top 5. Legacy,
Mm,
autonomy, knowledge, and then courage.
mm, mm,
Those things made the top 5 to me. I also would say it's very situational too. This
right.
was around the holidays. There's a lot of nostalgia. I'm going to be spending time with my family, right? So I would imagine that doing this exercise is something that you can do on a regular basis because it's a snapshot of my belief at that time,
Yes. Yeah.
you know.
Well, and just to add to that, it can also be helpful to be reflecting on which domain of my life am I trying to identify my values. So if we take domain as family life, career, leisure, that in one of those one domain may have a different set of values, or some of those from the 6 through 10 that you didn't make it may come up into the 1 through 5, and some of the 1 through 5 may fall down below. So it can also be helpful to be thinking about which domain of my life am I using as the reference point.
That that didn't even occur to me. It didn't even occur to me. And I think it's because maybe the there's, first of all, there's probably 25 websites that you can go to do
That's right.
this,
Yes.
right? So the one I hit was the first one on the list. So I went to that one and it didn't offer that as a thought. Perhaps if it had, I would have thought about it. I just was thinking about where I am right now, but really thinking about what you just said, it really was in that personal life, family kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I during that time, I had taken time off from my regular work to kind of prepare for the holidays and spend time with the family. So I was already in that mindset.
Yeah.
Although family is very important to me, you know. So
Yeah.
it was very interesting. It was very interesting.
So then, once you have identified those 5
Mhm.
values, it can be helpful to be thinking about behaviors that are exemplifying those values. In other words, what would I be seeing if I were a fly on the wall, or if I were a camera in your house? What would I be seeing you doing that would be evidence that courage, curiosity, was important to you?
That is a really good question. I mean, I and that would also be in the perspective of the observer.
Right. That would be me watching you, because I can't know that courage is important to you. I have to see
Mhm.
evidence of it to be
Mhm.
able to think, wow, I can see Francis being courageous. Right.
Mhm.
Um,
It is. So when and that brings another dimension to this. It's almost like the Twilight Zone. Do 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 do. But if your perspective is based off of your core values,
mm,
what you may identify as courageous is not what I identify as courageous. And so although I have anchored that as no, that's one of my core values, because of your experiences in life, you may not see the things I do as courageous.
mm, mm. Yes. Well,
Do do
that's
do
true
do
for
do do
sure.
do 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 do.
Yes. Right. Because I might, to give you an example, something that I talk about in the book is I identify as someone, as an adult male survivor of childhood sexual abuse. And will freely share my story, and people will often say, wow, that was courageous that you shared your story, or that was vulnerable, that was a
Mhm.
vulnerability, etc. But to me, I don't experience it as courageous. It's just a artifact of my history. It's not particularly courageous. So that's
Mhm.
a great example that some people may perceive it um, as courageous when you yourself don't experience it
Mhm.
as courageous.
Mhm.
When I think of courage, I think about doing something even in the face of the fear that you have, that maybe fear is if you followed that emotion, if you were led by that emotion, it may deter you away from pursuing what's important. But if you had courage with that element of fear, you'll still move towards what you say is important, even in the face of the anxiety that you feel.
And that is really how that is exactly the definition I use. And so for an example, being a part of this podcast is courageous for me.
Hmm.
And it's not something that I'm not really vocal about the topic of making nice with naughty, and just the willingness to say, I don't really know what that means, Tom. Right? In this forum, we're open to the globe,
Right, right, right.
right? That to me in my mind, this is courage.
Yeah.
Where again, somebody else may think, oh my gosh, that's because it's all in the eyes of the beholder. It's all in the
Mm,
person who's experiencing that.
mm,
And
mm.
as far as like the curiosity and knowledge, to me learning is so important. And I think anybody that knows me or has spent time with me, I'm always seeking out to learn, right? So
Yeah.
that is an important thing. But the having the different domains, that it gives it a whole nother perspective. So if you're doing the exercise and you do it in a particular domain, how do you even get your brain set into that way of thinking? How do you just have to kind of say, in the presence of my career, is this important to me? Is that how you would do it?
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be a beginning. There for a lot of over controlled people, they are driven by wanting to be right the first time. And I would encourage people just to be experimental and allow themselves to come up with the best possible list of values for this time in their life. At some other time in their life, things may change. To
Mhm.
give you an
Mhm.
example, financial security was way more important to me when I had young children. Right. And so
Sure.
when my children were young, I had employment. I was running a university counseling center, and that gave me a predictable income. Right. As they got older, that financial security, having that safety net there, was less important, not unimportant, just
Mhm.
less important. And so I was able to pursue more unpredictability, right, instability, uh, uh, because that value had shifted for me. So my
Mhm.
life situation has shifted, but again, it's still important. I want to feel financially secure, um, but it's not what drives my decision making now. And I think, in essence, having established my own financial security where I'm not reliant on an employer, that gives one the freedom to pursue other values, right? Other
Sure.
interests, and this whole conversation about values is an essential element of that acceptance and commitment therapy that I talk about in the book, where part of acceptance and commitment therapy is identifying your values and taking committed action toward or in that reflect those values. And so,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
in the context of making nice with naughty, if, for example, someone has a value of spontaneity, they want to be spontaneous,
Mhm.
right? Um, well, when they are feeling horny, do they just blurt it out and say, "I'm feeling horny"? Right?
Not if
That,
they're at the theater.
or maybe at the theater, right? Uh, uh, that's a good example. A
Not in
lot of
church.
uh, uh, there's an OnlyFans for that.
or or synagogue or mosque.
Uh, uh, yeah, exactly, exactly. But the idea is in how do you choose what action to take? Well, you take actions that reflect your values. Ultimately, that's the what I'm getting at. And so if you want to be more spontaneous, if that's important to you, well, then what would be the actions that you would have to take that would reflect it? And then you commit to those actions.
Mhm.
Otherwise, they're just ideas, that don't move you in any particular direction.
So the values, when you're going through them, and the question is, are these important to you? And if so, are these important to you? It doesn't necessarily say, do you practice these values? And I think that sometimes that can be seen as, I practice those values. These are the values I practice. But really the question is, are they important to you?
Well, yes, and from a from an acceptance and commitment therapy perspective, the one of the assumptions of ACT is that mental distress, psychological distress, is a byproduct of not living out your values.
Oh, I see.
So when we don't live out our values, we have a psychological distress. I think I may have mentioned this in a prior episode, that I have come to conclude that if someone experiences a prolonged state of discontent, and when I
Mhm.
talk about prolonged state, I'm talking like more than a few hours. That if someone experiences a prolonged state of discontent, it's because of one or both of the following reasons. They are focusing on shit they have no control over, and or they're not taking action on the things that they have control over.
Mhm. Yeah.
So they may know what they need to do. They may know that they should go walk that 10,000 steps. That they know that they may need to meditate, or they may know that they need to talk to a coworker about interpersonal distress, but they don't do it. And then they're wondering, why are they so unhappy? Why are they discontented for such a period of time? Again, it's they're focusing on things that they don't have control over. How is that other person going to respond? What will they feel? What will they do? Well, I don't have any control over that, but I'm focusing on it, right? Or conversely, not taking action on the things that they actually do have control over.
I think about it as an internal conflict. This internal conflict that's happening, and the not fully understanding what to do with that internal conflict. Just this discomfort is a conflict of the value that is important to me, and then what's happening or what I'm experiencing. And those two, if they're at odds with each other, then there's this internal conflict that happens. Do
That's
I
right.
participate in this? Do I not participate in this?
Mm,
This is something that's I'm a part of inadvertently or whatever, but there's an internal conflict, and then that in itself can shut people down, have this incredible amount of anxiety around it, and not understanding what the source of that conflict is coming from.
right. And I'm glad you brought that up, because anxiety that we'll talk about more when we
Mm-hmm.
go into the next chapter. But that anxiety, like all emotion, is giving you information about your relationship with your environment, whether that environment is
Mm-hmm.
between you and the external world or between your ears. So when we have emotion, emotions are just information about our relationship with our environment.
Yeah.
And if I'm having internal conflict, that information may be suggesting I'm avoiding having external conflict. And because I'm avoiding having external conflict, there's still energy there, right? Emotion, energy and motion. There's still energy that's there, but
Mm-hmm.
where does it get stuck? It gets stuck internally.
Right. Right. Our
And and
stomach,
and and then and
our gut.
anxiety
Mm-hmm.
anxiety is meant to be activating. It's fascinating how often uh, uh, people will just sit when they're anxious. So your body is being flooded with adrenaline,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
meant to propel you into action, and they just sit there, right? And of course that
Yeah.
makes the situation worse. They have to somehow burn off those hormones.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it would be this is great segue into chapter 7 for sure. So chapter 7 is all about making friends with anxiety. And I foresee this being probably another episode as we continue through anxiety because this chapter is packed. And I have a lot of questions that I want to ask you about. And then I feel kind of excited about this chapter in the sense that I have some background in it. Now, I as a psych nurse practitioner, I work with people all the time with anxiety disorders. So I feel like it's a subject I know something about.
Mm-hmm.
Where some of the other things we've talked about, I'm like, oh, I have no idea, but I'm learning. So with the OC and their anxieties, particularly their anxieties in context to the book, have to do with their sexual performance, right? And following rules and making sure that their performance is whatever their perception of stellar is, right?
Yeah.
And how anxiety can how anxiety can fuel that. I'm going to read what you have. It's so interesting to me. You talk about early in this chapter about OC's anxiety related to sex and that these anxieties are a product of sexual perfectionism
Mm.
and perceived as rules associated with sex. And I'm wondering if you could expand on that because I we have gone over that they have rules like I can only have sex on Saturday and you have to have an orgasm every time we have sex and sex means these are the steps that we do. Is there more than just this agenda in their list? Do they have an expectation of their emotional response? Is
That
that part of the perfectionism too?
It certainly can be. So when I talk about sexual perfectionism, I talk about the four flavors. Those four flavors are I have to be sexually perfect. My partner has to be sexually perfect. I think my partner thinks I have to be sexually perfect. And then the last one, society expects me to be sexually perfect. And so when there is this expectation, like you said, right? When there's this expectation around perfectionism, and why is there? The thought is, if I can have it perfect, then I don't have to experience the anxiety, the humiliation, the embarrassment of things unfolding in unexpected ways. So, uh, listeners may recall that for a lot of over controlled people, their greatest fear is
Mhm.
uncertainty. They want certainty. Um, a lot of my clients, for example, will use Viagra, Cialis, even inject Trimex because they want absolute certainty that they're going to get an erection.
Oh.
And then because they want absolute certainty that they're going to get an erection, and because they may chemically induce the erection, then they expect that their partner will want to take part in using the erection for their pleasure.
Mhm.
Right.
Mm.
Without having a conversation that may be rife with vulnerability, embarrassment, insecurity, to develop the relationship in those kind of meaningful, invulnerable ways. But again, for over controlled people, uncertainty is a problem because of the vulnerability that they feel in the face of the uncertainty. So it's reconciling those elements, right? Uh, 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 sexual perfectionism and the thoughts that are fueling those systems of beliefs that are fueling that
Mhm.
perfectionism. That's the work. So by making friends with anxiety, we're no longer treating anxiety as the enemy, but as a friend. As a friend, meaning that anxiety is giving me feedback about something that's not working here,
Mhm.
and I can continue to do the things that feed the anxiety, such as
Mhm.
taking the Viagra, the Trimex, or I can engage in conversation with my partner, with myself, that may be anxiety producing, but ultimately leads to a much more intimate, meaningful, fulfilling sex life. Now, let me just say before, perhaps some listeners may have biological, organic reasons for using
Mhm.
ED medication. And this is not what I'm
Mhm.
talking about. If someone is having erectile difficulties because of other health related concerns, but and they're not able to get an erection during
Mhm.
masturbation, or they're not waking up with erections, and then that is more likely suggesting that an underlying medical explanation
Mhm. Mhm.
is there, and that
Mhm.
taking these medications can certainly be a valuable tool.
Mhm. I'm glad you mentioned that. I I am curious though, the sexual perfectionism. How is that how is that defined? Is that unique to each OC, or is there some have you come across like a particular theme that you hear when you're in therapy, or is it really just as unique as each of us are?
There's many commonalities on how people experience the I have to be sexually perfect, right? Or
Mhm.
my partner has to be sexually perfect. For example, my partner has to have an orgasm every time I have sex with her. If she doesn't have an orgasm, then that's evidence that I'm not enough for her. Or my partner has to ejaculate every time I have sex with him. And if he doesn't ejaculate, then he's not into me. Right.
Mm.
So those can be uh, 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 obviously different for different people, but that is a very common theme,
Mhm.
that my partner's erection is evidence of my worth to them. Or
Mm.
if I don't get an erection, they're going to reject me. They're going to not want to be with me. So I have to be sexually perfect so that they don't reject me.
I see. I see. When interesting enough, so those folks that are being treated for an anxiety disorder and they're on medication as an SSRI or an SNRI, some kind of medication to help with anxiety, one of the side effects is sexual dysfunction,
Right.
right? So if you are taking Effexor or venlafaxine, if you're taking Prozac, if you're taking many, 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 many of these medications, they have a sexual side effect.
You know, if it's all right, if I would be interested in having you share with the listeners, because this is an important conversation that isn't talked enough about. If someone is seeing is on prescribed on
Mm-hmm.
medications, whether it's psychiatric medications or not psychiatric medications, how do you recommend people talking to their prescriber about the sexual side effects or the sexual problems that may be attributed to the
Mm-hmm.
medication, and perhaps more, just as important, how to respond when perhaps a prescriber minimizes the emotional consequence of not being able to have sexual intimacy with the partner because they're
Mm-hmm.
emphasizing the disease process or the psychiatric condition. Their emphasis is
Sure.
reducing the distress in those areas and not quite concerned about the distress being caused by the
Mm-hmm.
sexual issues.
Mm-hmm.
What are your suggestions for patients in those situations?
That those are great questions. So first of all, I would encourage every person who's on any of those medications and they're experiencing a decrease in libido, they're experiencing uh, delayed onset of an orgasm or inability to have an orgasm, then if that was not the problem prior to the medication, and the medication, it seems very evident to you, the person taking the meds, that this never was a problem until I started taking this particular med, that needs to be communicated with your provider. And depending on how accessible your provider is, at the very least, put it down on a notepad or something that you can discuss at your next appointment with them. But if it is important that it is significantly impacting your life, like this is not acceptable, contacting the provider and getting seen sooner is the best way. I will tell you, many of these medications, that side effect can dissipate over time. Your body adapts to the medication and you are able to achieve an orgasm or have that libido restored. It will not restore to the level that it was before because the medication inherently, just the chemical compound of the medication can just, you know, cause you to have problems with your sex drive. So I mean, there's a chemical reaction that happens. Now, when a person comes to me and I've put them on medications, I typically will set them up with a follow appointment within 1 week because I want to see them and I want to know if they're having complications to their medicines. And and I will help them and tell them that these are the common side effects that happen, because sometimes the provider will say, have you having side effects from your medicine? And they're just kind of waiting for this person to say, but they may not know that that's even a side effect, right? So I'll just say, this medication that you've been prescribed, now they've already been told this prior to ever starting the meds, but when people are in a place of anxiety and they're seeking for help and they really want to be on a medication to help them, then going over all of these things can happen doesn't seem to be very. It doesn't really stick with them.
Mm.
Although I will say though, with my patients with anxiety disorders, it takes a lot for them to start medicine, right? Because they're very anxious about it. But once they do make the initial plunge and then they start taking their meds, when I meet with them, I'll say, have you experienced stomach upset? Have you experienced headaches? Have you experienced a decrease in your libido? Are you finding that you're having difficulty having an orgasm? And I don't care if I'm talking to a 19-year-old, 18-year-old. Now, in my practice, I only see 18 and older. Or if I'm talking to a 70-year-old, I'm going to
Mm.
ask the same questions. I don't make
Mm.
any. And typically, if indeed it's a problem, they'll tell me. Now, if they don't tell me, I can't work with that, but they have to be able to tell me. So when they do tell me, Yes, when I'm on this medication, my libido is horrible. I'll tell them, how has that impacted your relationships? I'll ask them, how has that impacted your relationships? And is it something that we want to continue? Do we want to reduce the dose? Do we want to just wait it out and see what happens? So a lot of it has to do with a person, what they're wanting to do, and what is the benefit of the medication. Have they noticed a decrease in their anxiety to where they are able to go and do things like they want to do? Many times with folks that have a generalized anxiety disorder, you had talked about just being still. They get stuck. They get stuck. So they are, um, you might see this as you're with somebody and they're at the grocery store and they're just stuck. They're not moving because maybe in their head they're trying to figure out, do I get this cereal or this cereal? I don't know. Maybe if I get this, then this and this is going to happen. Oh, I don't know. That's got this and this in it. I mean, they just get stuck. And to the outside person looking at them, it's like, hello, are you with me? Are we together? And it can be about anything. It can be about the type of clothes that they're going to wear for that day. It can be, do I do I do I do this particular task or do I not? Should I stay in home today because I know that there's gonna be a bad car accident and I'm gonna be part of it? Like, there's debilitating anxiety. And
Sure.
with the medication, with the therapy, we're seeing a reduction in those symptoms where they're able to go off and do things and participate in life. So really it's a matter of, is this is this medication is this medication providing you the relief you need, even though you may be having some sexual side effects? Now, if the sexual side effects, and this can only really be defined by them, are it's not worth the medication, then we look at, can we reduce your dose down enough where you can engage in psychotherapy and still and be able to engage in psychotherapy without your anxieties taking over, so that you will show up for your appointments, right? So, or or do we just continue to reduce it down, and now you're in a place where you realize, I need to have psychotherapy, I'm really committed to doing psychotherapy. Or some providers, and I have done this as well, would prescribe them an additional medication to help offset that sexual side effect. I'm not necessarily a fan of that, but if
Mm.
that medicine is helping them to get to work, helping them have a life that they're not caught up in the woes and the worries of anxiety, then I will give them an additional medication to help offset that.
Mm. Mhm.
You know,
What about if a patient experiences a provider who minimizes it? Is it easy just to find a different provider? What happens in those
yeah.
situations?
I appreciate you bringing me back to that question. So, um, depending on where you are in this country or in this world, you may have access to providers or you may not. And the depending on the medication that you're prescribed, you may have medications that are not available, or other providers are fearful of prescribing it or worried prescribing it. So I would encourage you that if you're in a situation where you don't feel like your provider is hearing you, to begin the effort of seeking another provider. But I would also caution you in that having a discussion with the provider would be the very best thing that you could do. And if I was that patient and I felt like I was being minimized, to be able to have the courage and say, provider, I hear what you're telling me, but that comment really makes me feel like this is not important to you.
Mhm.
And I say that because we can have a preset idea and we could be completely off the mark. The provider does care about you, or the provider doesn't care about you, and that is a wake-up call to that provider.
Mm.
And more often than not, the provider is going to say, of course I care about you. I mean, what
Mm.
provider, right, is going to say, "You're right. I just really don't care."
Yeah,
But
I think that that's great feedback, and certainly one of the things that I've informed my clients over the years is that all of your providers should be team you,
absolutely,
and
absolutely,
if at any time you feel like someone is not on your team, it's okay to find a different provider. And as Francis has mentioned, it's certain locations certainly can be harder to find local providers, and there are different rules about whether one can prescribe certain medications without seeing them initially in person, and all of that, um, different complications. But I think one of the upsides of the pandemic is that we've really normalized telehealth, and
correct.
uh, people have much greater access
Hmm.
to providers.
I would like to say though, because I've run into this as well, where I've had folks that have made appointments with me, and I might be like their eighth or ninth provider.
Mm,
And they tell me, I wanted to make this appointment to interview you to see if we're a good fit. Right. And so then now it's not a therapeutic relationship. It comes across when someone does that, it comes across to me that they're looking for someone who can empathize or support their dysfunction. And
mm,
so when you have that mindset and you're not willing to do the work, then this is a waste of money and a waste of time.
mm,
And you're going to constantly be on a quest to find that provider who, who hears you. We hear you. We may not have the same belief that you have. We may challenge your beliefs. We may come across, maybe say things that are difficult to hear, but it's all in the spirit of recovery and healing, and
mm,
not necessarily, you know as you and I know, therapy is work. Taking a pill is easy.
yeah.
It's easy. It comes with its own set of demons, but it's easy. But the therapy piece, it takes work. And so when a
Mm,
person comes to me and they're saying, and I've had this happen, they'll say, I wanted to interview you today because I want to know how you believe about this, this, and this. Do you have any concerns about prescribing these medications? And,
mm.
that doesn't come across well. It doesn't.
Right, right, right.
It's like having a date, going on your first date and having this agenda. Okay, so we're on a date and I'm going to ask you all these questions to know exactly what it is that you are, if we're going to be a good fit or not.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, I think what you're saying is, uh, uh, when you're on the lookout for a provider, are you looking for someone who's going to collude with the maintenance of your problem, or are you going to look for an advocate who believes in your recovery from the problem?
I think that you say it so nice. Yes.
Hello there, dear readers. I'm absolutely thrilled to announce the release of the Making Nice with Nadia audiobook, narrated by yours truly. As the author, I've poured my heart and soul in telling your story, especially how your psychological temperament shows up in the bedroom and how it gets in the way of intimacy. With every sentence, every emotion, I'm right there with you, guiding you through getting more meaning and fulfillment in your sexual and intimate relationships. The wait is over. You can now download the audiobook on Audible or from my website, drtommurray.com, and immerse yourself in where you reclaim the playfulness of your sexuality. My voice is your compass as you navigate through every titillating moment, gaining powerful insights from psychology. Claim your aha moment. Click on the link and join me on this unforgettable journey toward making nice with Naughty. Making Nice with Nadia audiobook, available on Audible. Download now.
But back to our conversation is the the person who's receiving treatment, they have to be in charge of their care, in the sense that they have to say, this is effective, this is not effective. And if you're unhappy with your provider, find a new provider.
Yeah.
That's what I would tell them. But
Mm.
if you, I would encourage you, although it's probably doubtful, but I would encourage that person to talk to their provider about it, because that is the beginning of facing those anxieties and understanding what the provider is thinking. And if for some reason you have a provider who is not engaged, who does not participate into your care, it's a good wake up call for them to hear that you're actually giving them information that's important to them.
Mm. Well, and I think certainly when it comes to mental health, in many ways, it's much easier to initiate a conversation that may be anxiety provoking, and hope for some mutual agreement than it is to fire that prescriber and look for another one. Because
Yes,
even as many people know, finding providers is just more challenging in general.
it certainly can be. It certainly can be. So I do welcome that conversation. Thank you for asking those questions, and uh, those folks who are having difficulties with their medications and feel like their provider is not not they're not able to talk to their provider. You're There's psychiatry for sure, which is the specialty that I'm in, but you can also get many of these medications from your primary care provider.
Mm,
And
good
so
point.
so don't always feel like you have to find a psychiatry clinic. You could go to your medical provider and say, "Hey, I'm experiencing this side effect from this medication. Is that something that you can take over? Can you take over that particular med?" And just see what they have to say too.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Utilize your resources.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I do have some questions as we travel through chapter 7 in regards to um, you talked about confronting anxiety producing beliefs.
Mm,
And this is one of those situations where we did the I did the value card sort right
mhm.
online, and that kind of showed me my values. But how do you even know what those anxiety producing beliefs are? If you
Mm.
have a belief, a way, something that's important that you believe is true, how do you identify that that particular belief is the source of the anxiety?
Great question. Um, uh, there are some clues where you can look at in terms of the word choice.
Okay.
If the thought you're having is a includes the words must or should or have to, right? It's that may be a indication that that is the anxiety producing thought. Um, uh, if the focus is on something you don't have any control over, then there may be evidence that, or that may suggest or point to that that's an anxiety producing thought. But when there is anxiety, there's often thoughts that are
Hmm.
supporting that anxiety. And if you can identify what the thought is, and again, I must be perfect. My partner must be perfect. I think my partner thinks I must be perfect. You know, if you can identify that, then you are able to unlock other solutions that hopefully we'll get to talk about, where you can correct or dismantle some of those thoughts. What I don't want readers to think is that you actually have control over the thoughts arising. And some people would be like, I
Hmm.
just wish I just wouldn't think about it. Right. Well, that
That's
isn't
never
how
going to
the mind works.
happen.
Yeah. That isn't how the mind works. The mind, there's some evidence, some very compelling evidence that the nature of our thought processes uh, are already in motion a fraction of a second before we're even conscious of it. So some of the neuroscience that's coming out is really lending support to the reality that there is no free will. I know that's a very controversial topic, but there's this in that there are already mechanisms that have started before
Hmm.
you're even conscious to it. And so it's like the train has already left the station. So
Hmm.
while we may not be able to control the thought that arises, what we do have control over is the relationship we have with those thoughts. Are we going to treat those thoughts as an enemy and be in a state of resistance to them?
Hmm.
Or are we going to treat them as a friend? And that question determines a lot around whether you're going to be adaptive or maladaptive in your life.
Tom, when you were talking about like the train has already left the station, it sounds like almost like cause and effect. But we just see the effect.
Mm,
So we experience this effect, this unsettledness, this anxiety, this the mind chatter. We experience all of that. We might have palpitations, we might have sweatiness, we might have physical symptoms as well. But again, how does one take that effect and find the cause? How do they do that?
through primarily through observation. What is your mind saying in that moment? What is the self-talk?
Mhm.
If they're journaling, if they're taking a moment, for example, in journal, what is the mind chatter saying?
Mhm.
Then that can illuminate what those thoughts are.
So it's almost like being a little detective, being curious.
Being curious.
Why am I having this thought? And again, that's kind of the plug for the journal that we talked about last time, is having a place to record your thought in context to your environment, because you brought that up
Hmm.
already too,
Right.
right? So and ideally at the moment that you're experiencing it, so you can say, okay, I'm feeling anxious, however you define that, and you can say, I am at the train station, I am on, I'm looking for my train. Like, you can have all kinds of items in your journal, but taking the
Mm,
time, I think that's the big piece, right? Understanding that these anxieties are going to manifest. They're pretty regular, you know that it's going to happen, and being like ahead of it, almost like going to the grocery store with a list. Like, you're
right.
prepared. So you know that when it happens, you can immediately make those observations, even if it's just one or two word observations. I
Yeah.
think that through your observations of what your environment is, because you already told us that there's a connection between environment and our emotions. So tell me, having somebody kind of explain what is that environment. Perhaps in the context of making nice with naughty, they find themselves in a intimate relationship, or in the act of intimacy, and it is not it is it the and it's a Thursday, right? So the environment is, it's a Thursday, or the lights are on or the lights are off. So there's some sort of environment that is causing them to have these anxiety pieces, because it doesn't fit that perfect piece. But in that moment, to take a pause Man, it would be kind of awkward, wouldn't it? Excuse me, partner. I need to journal my thoughts right now.
Well,
But when,
sometimes the pause
mm-hmm,
is, excuse me, partner, I need to go get a drink of water. One of the things that it came up for me as listening that I need to make explicit is that most anxiety is associated with a future oriented thought. That there's this thought about the future, and that future can be seconds from now, hours from now, days from now. But what if I don't get an erection? What if I don't have an orgasm? What if my partner judges me for not having an erection or an orgasm? What if my partner judges me because my belly shows a little more today? What
mm-hmm,
so it's
mm-hmm,
this anxiety tends to be a future orientation, where depression tends to be a past orientation, right? I didn't do the things that I wanted to do. My life didn't
mm-hmm,
pan out the way that
mm-hmm,
I wanted it to pan out. And so uh, uh, identifying what is that future orientation, what is the belief about the future that's so scary, right? That or fatalistic, or that you're maybe awfulizing. You're thinking, would it be absolutely terrible if it were to happen, and and dismantling it
mm-hmm.
through the process that hopefully we'll talk about.
Hmm. I think the pause is probably one of the best things you can do, and then having an opportunity to write what's going on, because I I believe that that it's through therapy that a person has the aha moment. I'm not convinced that somebody can do this alone,
Mm, mm,
because if you don't have that awareness of what that even could look like, I don't know how you could try to achieve something or try to focus onto something. I don't know. I think that if somebody is is stuck with their anxieties, and they find that even your book, as fabulous as it is, doesn't give them enough clarity for them to understand how they can work through that, I think they need to seek professional help with someone who is certified, trained in, with in this particular situation, in sex therapy, so that you're
mm,
not going and you're seeing a life coach or a counselor that maybe helps with organization, but doesn't give good sound information to help you with the sexual perfectionism. I think that's, to me, that is a big piece. I've never seen, and maybe because the people who are successful on their own don't come and see me, but so I'm already biased. But I think that this is something that you have to have someone to help you with.
mm, mhm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're preaching to the choir. Certainly, I think that's right, and perhaps on some future episode we can talk about what are the qualities of a therapist that
Mm-hmm.
points to effective work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that this seems like a wonderful time to wrap up this episode, and
I
then we'll give
agree.
people an opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into this notion of how to make anxiety your friend, and to learn some skills that help
Mm-hmm.
to lessen the grip that anxiety has on your decision making. Not that we're going to get rid of anxiety, as Francis mentioned. Anxiety is an important piece to our survival as a species, but we can certainly do things that lessen its grip on our lives, so that it's not so impactful relative to our sexual and intimate relationships and our lives in general.
I agree, Tom. I'm eager to see how our discussion continues, and I appreciate this time with you, Tom. It's very important and precious to me, and I appreciate your willingness to let me ask the questions in the way that I ask them. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that wraps up another episode of Making Nice with Naughty. We hope you enjoyed our exploration of intimacy for the rule-following and organized.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you found our discussions helpful or intriguing, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review.
Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps others discover the podcast. Plus, it lets us know what topics you'd like us to cover in the future episodes.
Have questions or you want to share your experiences? Connect with us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Links on the description.
And for more in-depth insights, be sure to grab a copy of my book, Making Nice with Naughty, available on Amazon and Audible for the audiobook.
Thank you again for spending time with us. Remember, you can be both organized and adventurous in matters of the heart.
Until next time, keep making nice with Naughty. To renew your passion
and ignite